Good evening, this is the Oscar expert here with Brother Bro, and it's time to review Challengers. This is a new film from Luca Guadagnino. The first of two films he's directing this year, and both these films are being written by Justin Kuritsky. So maybe we have a new, screenwriting star on our hands as well.
I think after this film alone, forget queer, this film will cement Justin Kuritsky's as extremely talented and sought-after screenwriter, because this film doesn't quite feel like any other I've seen. It falls somewhere like in a strange space outside of the typical film diet that we are given or presented. Like the choices we have when we go to the movie theater, right? It's like Whiplash, but less indie, but also really horny, and with characters who are just very unlikable, but also ones that you can't really take your eyes away from. And even the story structure, the movie jumps back and forth in time very liberally, and it feels like it's in a place between art house and commercial. Very much like dead in the center of those two things. And Luca Guadagnino, you might be thinking, oh, what will he do with a film that seems a little more commercial? Well, he will treat it with the care that he would treat an indie film with, and just with the very precise camera work and the kind of experimental nature of the editing. It was very intriguingly shot and put together. The cinematography, if anything, was enhanced by the budget. I mean, it felt like the camera could do absolutely anything. And there are some really crazy and really well done shots throughout this film. But now I'm kind of getting into a tangent. We didn't even say what it's about. The film's about two best friend tennis players who both desire the affection of a female tennis player.
It's like a very psychological love triangle going on here.
A lot of mind games.
Yeah. I felt like I was really locked into the movie once it kind of sold me on this premise of sex and tennis being very intermingled, or tennis being a relationship and, relationships being like tennis. If there's any pattern we can maybe spot in Luca Guadagnino's work, it's the sensuality of his films. Not to be mistaken with sexuality, which, many of his films are also very sexual, but there's something more to it. Even in Call Me By Your Name, for example, it feels like Timothy is just as in love with the summer heat as he is, with Armie Hammer. He's like Luca Guadagnino, there's layers to what could on the surface be described as horniness. And in this film, he has such a knack for the little details. The movie actually doesn't have a ton of sex or anything, but what makes it steamy are all these little details in the scene.
Yeah,
how the characters
talk to each other in just a conversation.
Yeah,
or
the smirks, like a smirk or a look that somebody might give another, or the way that they're interacting with the food that they're eating,
or the way they're
scene.
Playing tennis.
And I felt like the blocking was very strong in this movie.
Absolutely.
The shot compositions and all the directing choices were so deliberate. That's what I really loved about this movie. There's just thought put into every scene and how everything is constructed and how every angle is going to be framed to heighten the tension between the characters. It was also just really fun to feel this level of experimentation coming from Luca Guadagnino, and in a movie that is very fun and kinetic and lively.
Yeah, for a sports movie, you could even say. They shot the tennis matches in pretty much every conceivable way I could see you covering a tennis match. At times the cinematography felt very locked in and specific, and at other times it felt very a la carte. They switched to POV shots at times. You never know what the camera is going to do in those tennis scenes, but I also like that it's balanced out by the more contained interior scenes where the more intimate drama happens. I thought those scenes were equally well shot, but in a entirely different way. I also find that when I'm watching films and they're just trying to give me sex and make me aroused, that I don't really like those scenes, and I don't find them as interesting as maybe the build up to that scene. And this film is not heavily focused on showing sex and creating a spectacle out of that.
Well, it's all in the build up and it's all in the chase, and I think the movie's about that, even on a deeper level, on a very fundamental level. I think the movie limits itself to how deep it's willing to explore the characters, and I mostly respect the restraints that it has on where it wants to go with them. I think it really just wants to explore their relationship with each other, from where we see them in the beginning of the movie to the end. It's not backstory or what happened with my father.
I was wondering throughout the film, why is Zendaya so mean? Why is she like this? Because overall, the film, the characters are very cruel to each other, and especially her. Not that they're not willing participants in the relationships that they have with her, but just that's not really explored in the film. There's something that prevents me from being oh, I see why they're like this, or I see why this movie was made, like why you're exploring this. I feel like there's a little bit of a bigger picture lacking for me, but the film is still very deep where it wants you to look, like what it's concerned with. There's a lot of thought put into it, and I don't mind me some cruel characters and just being thrown into their shenanigans.
Yeah, I did think that the movie was hinting at like a deeper void in some of these characters. Definitely implied in a couple moments. I don't think it explored that.
Yeah, but I feel like if it tried to do that, it would become a different movie.
I kind of agree with you. It's like I equally respect it not doing that, and it also is maybe what I would say keeps this movie from like really resonating with me. But that's not gonna be a thing for everybody. Like some people are just gonna get like this stylish, awesome, horny fest, and they are going to, you know, cream in the theater, and that's going to be enough for many people. A couple other stylistic elements that are very worth mentioning here. The score from Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross is straight like club techno, and it booms over like domestic drama scenes.
It is not mixed so that it prioritizes the dialogue. The music is up here and the dialogue is also right here, or maybe even a little bit lower. And it was an interesting sound mixing choice, but I think it works, and I could hear what they were saying well enough.
There were a couple lines that I missed.
Yeah,
but I did think the choice overall was like very strong. Yeah. And it wouldn't have worked if it was playing in the background, like to make the point that it wanted to make about the scene.
A very fascinating use of music.
Yeah.
Now, sometimes I felt like, okay, here's this track again that we've heard maybe 10 times at this point, and I was wondering like if this is gonna feel a little bit old for me. I think story-wise, it fit so well with every scene that it wanted to be in that I don't really mind it. And there was also another really kind of beautiful and more haunting piece, and I thought that theme was really interesting and strong in some of the quieter scenes.
Yeah.
The music really might annoy some people though, but I think overall people are going to be into it. It's very much like head bobbing in your seat.
I saw people's feet tapping in the theater.
The guy next to me was like, you know, jamming out to it.
You can't help it. You have to. You have to.
But it gives the film a playfulness that I haven't mentioned it, but it's very consistently playful throughout. I think it's a huge goal of the film just to be fun and energetic and electrifying. And that's mainly what it's trying to give you, is this like whole body experience of whatever the fuck story, tennis, romance thing this is.
And I think the editing here is pretty spectacular as well. The way that the timeline builds up the tension and feels like one cohesive story, even as it jumps back and forth. Like, I thought that was really well done.
For me, the editing was fantastic. It felt experimental at times, where the cuts themselves are responsible for giving you a feeling by just being abrupt, being abrasive, being arrhythmic, but it's not relentlessly that. Like, very much like the cinematography, you know, it's that when it needs to be, and then it's like chill in other scenes.
And sometimes the opposite, where you get like long takes.
Yeah, there's a lot of contrast between the length of the takes, and often in the editing, especially the last scene, was so suspenseful. Like, they hold so much longer on a shot than you anticipate that they're going to. And it just builds anxiety in you, and I thought it worked really well. Yeah. There were even some editing choices that made me question whether that made sense or was logical or was good, but I think that's a healthy level of experimentation to have with editing, which I think is a very, by nature, art form that invites experimentation. I want someone to be like playing with cuts.
And the editing relied on the music a lot too. Like in those final scenes, I was like, this would just not be the same without the music.
The very opening of the film is awesome, and there are shots that appear before any credits, before any opening title. It kind of like brings you into the world so abruptly and in such a jarring way that it totally locked me into what I was about to see. And the ending was extremely well done. It was a hell of a finale. It's gonna have many people leaving the theater brimming with excitement.
I really liked all three of the lead performances here. And I almost felt most surprised by Josh O'Connor for some reason, like, because I feel like his character kind of revealed himself to have a surprising amount of layers.
Yeah, there's something like very devious but also disarming about him, and trying to read those two things at once makes his character very unique and intriguing. Mike Feist appropriately played a little more boyish and like affection starved very well. Zendaya was great in this role. She fit it extremely well. But all three performances were pretty perfect. I don't have too much to say about them, other than that they felt they really embodied their characters, and it feels like all three of these actors have enormous range.
I think they all ate. I think Luca let them really fly in this movie. This is going to be one of the highlights of the first half of the year, I think. I would give it an 8 out of 10.
I'm between an 8 and a 9. Something else for me was that it felt a little bit long. And like I said, my only other complaint is that the why is not totally there for me. I think I'm going to go with a 9 because I really want people to see it. It's an easy high recommendation for me.
It's a must-see. Now, some people probably want to know if we think this movie is getting Oscar nominations. Of course, it has an April release date that's kind of against it. I think what's more against it is that it just doesn't feel like an awards movie. I mean, it has superb crafts and very good performances.
Weirdly, I don't think Zendaya is a contender.
Maybe Golden Globe comedy, though.
I would not go as far to say it's going to get Best Picture.
It's more like a Letterboxd, like, young people appealing movie, I think.
Yeah. I think it would need to have more heart, and it's very steely.
Maybe you could get screenplay, though, as you mentioned. If we run out of contenders in that category, you know, people could be looking at the movie right there, and
The film's screenplay is really interesting. It fits the definition of an original screenplay very well. Like, it has that innovative quality to it. Now, editing's a really interesting case because it's showy enough that it could happen, and it kind of reminds me of, like, a Baby Driver getting nominated for editing but not being considered for picture or any above-the-line categories.
That's a rare thing, though, to happen in general.
And also, when that happens, usually it needs sound to go along with it, and I don't think this movie would get sound.
Score, people think could happen, and we know Tresner gets nominated, and, you know, they've won 2 Oscars. You know, in a way, they're branch favorites, but, you know, like with Gone Girl, I think that they kind of need the movie to at least be there. I think this is not going to make it in for score.
Also unconventional for a score.
Yeah.
Like, Souls was more traditional, you know?
Look, if I were to bet on it, I would say this is going to get goose-egged. But, you know, you never know.
I can't shake it that maybe screenplay could actually happen.
That's fair.
I can't shake it.
That's fine. Thank you for watching. Thank you for subscribing.
What would you do to be Zendaya's lapdog?